The transport ship shook violently as it flew through space. Inside the metal walls, something roared with such force that the entire vessel trembled. The sound was not like any animal from Earth. It was deeper, angrier, and filled with a rage that seemed to have no end. Captain Zorks checked his instruments with shaking hands. His green skin had turned pale, and his 4 eyes darted nervously between the screens. The Zephyrian Empire had given him one simple job: transport their most dangerous weapon to the front lines of the war. They called it the Cathara, and they said it could win any battle. But now something was wrong. Red lights flashed all over the control panel. The containment field was failing. The massive creature in the cargo hold was breaking free, and there was nothing Zorks could do to stop it. Another roar echoed through the ship. This time, the sound was accompanied by the screech of tearing metal. The creature was destroying its cage from the inside. "Sir, we need to land immediately," said his co-pilot, a nervous creature with tentacles for arms. "The containment won't hold much longer." Zorks looked at the planet below them. New Haven, a peaceful colony where humans lived alongside other species. Farms stretched across green valleys and small cities dotted the landscape. It was the last place in the galaxy that deserved what was about to happen. "Send a warning to the surface," Zorks ordered. "Tell them we have an emergency." But it was too late. A thunderous crash shook the ship as the Kythera finally broke free. The creature was enormous, standing 12 feet tall on powerful legs. Its body was covered in scales that looked like dark crystal, each one sharp enough to cut through steel. Its eyes glowed red with hatred, and when it opened its mouth, rows of teeth gleamed like white daggers. The beast looked around the cargo hold and roared again. But this roar was different. It seemed to reach into the minds of everyone on the ship. Zorks felt his thoughts become cloudy. His hands moved without his permission, pressing buttons and flipping switches. The co-pilot began to walk toward the cargo hold like he was sleepwalking. The Cathara had a power beyond its physical strength. It could control minds. The transport ship began to fall toward the planet. Zorks tried to regain control, but his mind felt like it was wrapped in thick fog. The creature's mental influence was too strong. All he could do was watch as his ship crashed into the forest outside New Haven. The impact threw the Cathara forward, but it landed on its feet like a cat. The creature looked around at the burning wreckage, then at the trees and sky of this new world. It sniffed the air and caught the scent of many different life forms nearby. The beast smiled, showing all of its terrible teeth. In New Haven, people were going about their normal day. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and shops. Alien visitors from other worlds walked the streets peacefully, buying food and talking with human friends. It was a typical afternoon in one of the most peaceful places in the galaxy. Then the alarms began to sound. The warning came too late. By the time the first emergency broadcast reached the citizens, the Cathara was already moving through the forest toward the city. Its massive claws left deep marks in the earth with each step. The first victims were a group of farmers working in a field near the forest edge. They saw the creature emerging from the trees and tried to run. But when the beast opened its mouth and roared, they stopped moving. Their eyes became blank and empty. They turned around and began walking toward the monster. The Kythera looked at these new servants and made a sound that might have been laughter. It grabbed one of the farmers with a clawed hand and threw him aside like a toy. The creature was not interested in servants. It wanted to destroy. News of the attack spread quickly. The colonial defense forces assembled as fast as they could. Soldiers in powered armor carried energy weapons toward the threat. They were brave men and women from many different worlds, trained to fight any enemy, but they had never fought anything like this. The first squad encountered the Kythera as it was destroying a water treatment plant. The massive creature was tearing apart metal pipes with its bare claws, enjoying the sound of destruction. When it saw the soldiers, it stopped and stared at them. "Open fire!" shouted the squad leader. Energy beams struck the creature from all sides. The weapons were powerful enough to destroy a tank, but they barely left marks on the Kythera's crystal scales. The beams seemed to bounce off its hide like light reflecting from a mirror. The creature roared, and the squad leader felt his mind go blank. His finger squeezed the trigger of his weapon, but now he was pointing it at his own teammates. Around him, other soldiers began turning their guns on each other. The Cathara watched the humans fight among themselves and made that terrible laughing sound again. When they had all fallen, it continued its path of destruction toward the city center. More soldiers came. Each group was larger and better armed than the last, but the result was always the same. The creature's hide was too strong for their weapons, and its mind control was too powerful for their training to overcome. By evening, half of New Haven was in ruins. The Cathara had destroyed power plants, communication centers, and transportation hubs. Fires burned across the city, and the air was filled with smoke and screams. Thousands of people were fleeing toward the evacuation centers on the far side of the city. Humans carried their children, while alien families helped each other escape. Everyone was running from the monster that nothing could stop. Dr. Elena Vasquez was not running. She was in her laboratory, working frantically at her computer. As the colony's expert on alien life forms, she was trying to find some weakness in the creature that was destroying her home. The data, she found, made her feel sick. The Cathara was not just a weapon. It was a living being that had been changed into something horrible. According to the files, it had once been a peaceful creature from a distant world. But the Zephyrian Empire had captured it and spent years twisting its mind and body into the perfect instrument of war. "What have they done to you?" she whispered as she looked at images of what the creature had been before. In the old pictures, its scales had been blue and beautiful. Its eyes had been gentle. It had been a guardian of crystal gardens, protecting beautiful places from harm. Now it was a monster that lived only to destroy. Elena heard another roar in the distance, closer this time. The Cathara was moving toward the evacuation centers where all the refugees were hiding. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. She looked at her research again, hoping to find something, anything that might help. But the creature seemed perfect in its deadliness. Its scales were harder than any known metal. Its mind control worked on every species that had been tested. Its strength was beyond measure. The files said that nothing could stop the Cathara once it was released. Every world that had faced it had fallen within days. As Elena packed up her research and prepared to run, she wondered if there was any hope left for New Haven. The creature seemed truly unstoppable. Outside her window, another building exploded into flames. The monster was getting closer, and soon there would be nothing left to save. The reinforcement ships arrived like silver stars against the dark sky. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, watching New Haven burn below. Smoke rose from dozens of fires across the city. Even from space, he could see the path of destruction the creature had carved through the colony. Veltar was a Canthari, a species known throughout the galaxy for their military skill. His blue skin was marked with scars from many battles, and his 6 arms could handle multiple weapons at once. He had fought in wars across 20 star systems, and had never met an enemy he could not defeat. But as he studied the reports from the surface, he felt something he had not experienced in decades. Doubt. "Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from the Colonial Defense Forces," reported his communications officer. The young soldier's voice was shaky. "They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance. All military units on the surface have been neutralized." Veltar looked at the tactical display. Red markers showed the locations where defense squads had been destroyed. There were dozens of them, scattered across the city like fallen leaves. Each marker represented brave soldiers who had died trying to stop a single creature. "What's the current location of the target?" he asked. "Moving toward the central plaza, sir. It appears to be heading for the main evacuation center." Veltar made his decision. "Deploy all troops. Set up a perimeter around the plaza. We'll make our stand there." The hangar bays of the fleet opened, and hundreds of soldiers dropped toward the planet's surface. They came from 7 different worlds, each species bringing their own special abilities to the fight. The Vorlax warriors had armor that could stop plasma cannons. The Nethys fighters could move faster than human eyes could follow. The Gorvani, heavy troops, carried weapons that could level city blocks. Together, they represented the finest military force in the galaxy. Within an hour, they had surrounded the central plaza with walls of energy shields and weapon emplacements. Veltar himself took position on the front lines, his 6 hands holding different types of guns. Around him, 300 elite soldiers waited for their enemy to arrive. They did not wait long. The Kithara came walking down the main street like it owned the world. Its crystal scales caught the light from the fires around it, making the creature look like it was made of dark gems. Each step left cracks in the pavement, and its red eyes swept back and forth as it searched for new things to destroy. When it saw the military force waiting for it, the beast stopped and tilted its head. For a moment, it seemed almost curious, like it was wondering what these new toys could do. Then it smiled. "All units, open fire!" Veltar commanded. The plaza erupted in light and sound. Energy beams, plasma bolts, and explosive shells struck the Kithara from every direction. The barrage was so intense that the creature disappeared in a cloud of smoke and flame. For a few seconds, there was silence. The soldiers held their breath, hoping that their combined firepower had finally stopped the monster. But when the smoke cleared, the Kithara was still standing. Its scales now glowed with absorbed energy, like a battery that had been recharged. The creature looked down at itself, then at the weapons pointed toward it, and it began to laugh. The sound was worse than its roar. The laughter seemed to crawl into the soldiers' minds, making them question everything they believed about courage and hope. Several of the younger fighters dropped their weapons and began to back away. "Hold the line!" Veltar shouted. "Keep firing!" But their weapons were having no effect. Instead, the energy they poured into the creature was making it stronger. The Kithara's scales grew brighter with each shot, and the beast seemed to grow larger as it absorbed the power directed at it. The creature raised one clawed hand toward the nearest weapon emplacement. Energy that looked exactly like the soldiers' own weapons shot from its fingers. The blast struck the gun position and turned it into smoking metal. The Kithara had learned to use their own weapons against them. "Spread out!" Veltar ordered. "Use physical weapons only." The soldiers switched to projectile weapons and bladed tools. Bullets bounced off the creature's scales like raindrops, but at least they were not making it stronger. Some of the bravest fighters charged forward with swords and spears, hoping to find gaps in its armor. The Kithara watched them come and opened its mouth. The roar that emerged was different from before. This one seemed to reach directly into their brains, bypassing their ears entirely. The charging soldiers stopped as if they had hit an invisible wall. Their eyes became empty, and they turned their weapons on their own teammates. Veltar felt the psychic attack trying to take control of his mind. His military training helped him resist, but he could feel his thoughts becoming fuzzy around the edges. Around him, more and more soldiers were falling under the creature's influence. "Fall back!" he commanded, but his voice sounded strange and distant to his own ears. "Everyone fall back!" The retreat became a disaster. Soldiers who were still in control of their minds had to fight their way past teammates who had become the creature's puppets. The Kithara walked through the chaos like a king surveying his domain, occasionally swatting aside anyone who got too close. Veltar was one of the last to escape the plaza. As he ran, he looked back to see the creature sitting among the wreckage of their weapons, its scales now glowing so brightly that it was hard to look at directly. The beast had not just defeated them, it had fed on their attack and become stronger than before. The evacuation centers were only a few blocks away. Thousands of civilians were packed into buildings that had been designed as emergency shelters. They had thick walls and heavy doors, but Veltar knew those defenses would not stop the Kithara for more than a few minutes. He activated his communicator and called the fleet. "This is Commander Veltar. The surface mission has failed. Repeat, we have failed to neutralize the target." "Sir, what are your orders?" came the reply from space. Veltar looked at the burning city around him, then toward the shelters where innocent people were waiting to die. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," he said quietly. "If we cannot save New Haven, we must at least prevent the creature from spreading to other worlds." "Sir, there are still civilians down there." "I know." Veltar closed his eyes. In 30 years of military service, he had never given an order that felt so much like surrender. "Give them 10 minutes to evacuate what they can, then destroy everything." Meanwhile, Dr. Elena Vasquez was in the main evacuation center still trying to find answers in her research. She had set up her computer in a corner of the crowded building, working while families huddled nearby with their few possessions. The data told a story of centuries of torture. The Cathara had been captured as a young creature and subjected to experiments that broke its mind and rebuilt it for war. Its natural abilities had been twisted and amplified until it became the perfect weapon. But Elena noticed something in the older records. Before its capture, the creature had been known for something unusual. It had formed bonds with other life forms, even creatures from different worlds. The original Cathara had been able to sense emotions and respond to them. What if, she whispered to herself, what if some part of the original creature is still in there? She began searching for more information about the beast's original nature. The files were fragmentary, damaged by years of classified research and cover-ups. But slowly, a picture emerged of what the Cathara had been before the Zephyrians destroyed. Its mind. It had been a guardian, not a destroyer. A protector, not a killer. And most importantly, it had been capable of forming emotional connections with other beings. Elena looked around the shelter at the terrified families. Parents held, their children close, whispering words of comfort even though they all knew death was coming. In a few minutes, the Cathara would break through their defenses, and everyone would die. Unless there was still something left of the creature it used to be. Elena closed her research files and stood up. She had an idea, but it was so desperate that it seemed insane. Still, insane ideas were better than no ideas at all. She began walking toward the exit of the shelter. "Doctor, where are you going?" called one of the security guards. "It's not safe out there." Elena paused at the door. "Maybe," she said, "but it's not safe in here either." Outside, she could hear the sound of the Cathara moving closer. Its footsteps shook the ground, and its occasional roars made the building's walls tremble. Soon, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy would be here, and Elena planned to try talking to it. Marcus Chen was 8 years old, and he was lost. The evacuation convoy had been moving smoothly until the attack came. Fighter ships appeared in the sky without warning, their weapons turning the lead vehicles into burning metal. In the chaos that followed, families were separated as people ran in all directions, looking for safety. Marcus had been holding his mother's hand when the explosion knocked them both down. When the smoke cleared and his head stopped ringing, she was gone. So was his father. So was everyone else he knew. The boy stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his clothes. Around him, abandoned vehicles burned on the road. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere, toys, clothes, family photos. But there were no people. Everyone had either escaped or been taken to a different shelter. Marcus was completely alone. He knew he should be scared. His parents had told him about the monster that was destroying the city. They had shown him pictures on the news of the terrible creature with crystal scales and glowing red eyes. Every adult he knew was frightened of it. But Marcus was not thinking about the monster right now. He was thinking about how quiet everything had become. The explosions and screaming had stopped. Even the fires seemed to burn more softly. For a boy who lived in a busy city, the silence felt strange. He started walking. His parents had taught him that if he ever got lost, he should try to find a police officer or go to a public building. But all the buildings he could see were either damaged or empty. The police were probably busy fighting the monster. Marcus walked for almost an hour. Through the empty streets, his feet hurt, and he was getting hungry. The emergency food bar in his pocket was supposed to be saved for real emergencies, but this seemed like a real emergency to him. He sat down on the steps of a library and unwrapped the food bar. It tasted like cardboard with artificial strawberry flavor, but it made his stomach feel better. While he ate, he thought about what to do next. The residential district around him was completely abandoned. Houses stood empty with their doors open as if people had left in a great hurry. Some windows were broken, and personal items littered the yards. But there was no sign of the terrible destruction he had seen on the news broadcasts. Maybe the monster was far away. Maybe he was safe here. Marcus finished his food and was about to start walking again when he heard something. It was a sound like thunder, but it came from the ground instead of the sky. The pavement under his feet vibrated. With each thunderous noise, footsteps. Very big footsteps. The boy looked down the street and saw something moving between the buildings. At first, it looked like a dark shadow. But as it came closer, Marcus could see what it really was. The monster was even bigger than it had looked on television. The Kithara moved slowly down the street, its massive head turning from side to side, as it looked at the empty houses. Its crystal scales caught the light from the setting sun, making patterns of color dance across its hide. When it breathed, Marcus could see steam coming from its nostrils. Any reasonable person would have run. Any adult who saw this creature would have screamed and fled in terror. The Kithara was death walking on 4 legs, a nightmare made real. But Marcus did not run. He was tired from walking and his legs hurt. The steps of the library were comfortable, and he was curious about this creature that had frightened so many people. He stayed where he was and watched the monster approach. The Kithara stopped when it saw him, its glowing red eyes fixed on the small human child sitting calmly on the library steps. The creature tilted its massive head as if it could not understand what it was seeing. For several long moments, they stared at each other. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy, and an 8-year-old boy, separated by maybe 50 feet of empty street. Then the monster took a step forward. Marcus had grown up with animals. His family had rescued dogs, cats, and even a few exotic pets from other worlds. His father had taught him that scared animals were often more dangerous than mean animals, and that the best way to deal with a frightened creature was to stay calm and speak softly. The monster looked scared to Marcus. Its eyes were angry, but underneath the anger he could see something else. Pain, maybe, or loneliness. "Hi there," Marcus said in the same gentle voice he used with hurt animals. "Are you okay?" The Kithara stopped walking. Its mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth, but instead of the terrible roar that had terrified entire armies, it made a small, confused sound. Marcus slid down from the library steps and sat on the sidewalk. This made him much smaller and less threatening. It was something his father had taught him to do with nervous dogs. "You look sad," the boy continued in his calm, quiet voice. "Did someone hurt you?" The creature's red eyes began to change. For just a moment, they flickered to a different color, a soft blue that reminded Marcus of the ocean on a sunny day. But then they turned red again, and the Kithara shook its massive head as if trying to clear away unwelcome thoughts. It took another step toward the boy. Marcus could feel something strange happening in his mind. It was like having someone else's thoughts trying to push into his head. The feeling was uncomfortable, but not painful. He had experienced something similar when playing with his family's Zalarian pet, a creature that could share emotions telepathically. "That tickles," Marcus said with a small laugh. "Are you trying to talk to me in my head? That's pretty cool." The mental pressure increased, but something unexpected happened. Instead of taking control of the boy's mind like it had with the soldiers, the Kithara's psychic attack seemed to bounce off harmlessly. Marcus felt the alien thoughts brush against his consciousness, but they could not stick. He was somehow immune to the creature's most powerful weapon. The Kithara stumbled backward, confusion clear on its reptilian features. Every other being it had encountered had fallen under its control within seconds. But this small human was different somehow. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out his water bottle. He was thirsty, but the creature looked like it might be thirsty too. Its breathing seemed labored, and there was dust on its scales from walking through the destroyed parts of the city. "Are you thirsty?" he asked, holding out the bottle. "I can share." The monster stared at the offered water for a long time. Its clawed hands opened and closed, as if it was fighting some internal battle. Marcus waited patiently, the way he had learned to wait for nervous animals to trust him. Finally, the Kithara took a careful step forward, then another. Its massive form cast a shadow over the boy, and Marcus had to tilt his head back to look up at its face. Up close, he could see that the creature's scales were not just dark crystal. They were covered in old scars and burn marks. Someone had hurt this animal many times over many years. Its eyes, when they flickered blue instead of red, looked very old and very tired. "Someone was really mean to you, weren't they?" Marcus said softly. "I'm sorry that happened." The Kithara made a sound that was almost like a whimper. It was not a noise that anyone would have expected from the galaxy's most feared weapon. For a moment, It sounded like what it truly was. A hurt and lonely creature that had forgotten how to be anything except angry. Marcus held out the water bottle again. This time the creature slowly lowered its great head and allowed the boy to pour water into its mouth. The liquid ran down its chin, but it seemed grateful for the kindness. "There you go," Marcus said. "Feel better?" The boy yawned. It had been a very long and confusing day, and he was tired. Without really thinking about it, he leaned back against the creature's front leg, using it like a warm, scaly pillow. The Cathara froze, uncertain what to do. No living thing had voluntarily touched it in centuries, except to cause pain. But the boy's contact was gentle and trusting. After a moment, the creature carefully lowered itself to the ground, moving slowly so as not to disturb its small companion. For the first time in longer than it could remember, the Cathara's eyes stayed blue instead of red. The rage that had burned in its heart for so many years began to cool, replaced by something it had almost forgotten existed. The feeling of being wanted instead of feared. Marcus fell asleep there on the empty street, curled up against the side of the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. And for the first time since its capture, the Cathara stood guard over something instead of destroying it. In the distance, search parties were looking for the missing boy. When they found him, they would discover something that would change everything they thought they knew about monsters, weapons, and the power of simple kindness. Marcus woke up as the sun was rising. For a moment, he forgot where he was. The world felt warm and safe, like sleeping next to his family's big dog. But when he opened his eyes, he saw crystal scales instead of fur. The Cathara had not moved during the night. It sat like a giant statue, watching the empty street with patient blue eyes. When it noticed that Marcus was awake, it made a soft rumbling sound that might have been a greeting. "Good morning," Marcus said, stretching and yawning. "Did you sleep okay?" The creature tilted its head. Through their mental connection, Marcus could sense confusion. The Cathara had not truly slept in many years. Its creators had built too much anger and pain into its mind for real rest. But something about the boy's presence had brought a kind of peace it had forgotten was possible. Marcus was hungry again. He had one more food bar in his backpack, but it was meant for emergencies. He looked around the empty street and realized this was definitely still an emergency. As he unwrapped the food, he noticed that the Cathara was watching every movement with great interest. Its stomach made a low, growling sound. "Are you hungry too?" Marcus asked. "I don't know what you usually eat, but you can have some of this if you want." He broke the food bar in half and offered part of it to the creature. The Cathara sniffed the food carefully, then took it with surprising gentleness. Its sharp teeth could have bitten off the boy's hand by accident, but it was very careful not to hurt him. While they shared the simple breakfast, Marcus began to understand more about his new friend. The mental connection between them was growing, stronger, and he could sense fragments of the creature's memories. He saw flashes of a beautiful world with crystal trees and gardens that sang in the wind. He felt the joy that Cathara had once known as it cared for growing things and played with creatures smaller than itself. But he also sensed darker memories, capture, pain, needles and machines, and voices that spoke of war and weapons. "They took you away from your home," Marcus said quietly. "They hurt you and made you angry, so you would fight for them." The Cathara's eyes flickered between blue and red as it struggled with these memories. The conditioning that had turned it into a weapon was still strong, but the boy's presence seemed to weaken its hold. Marcus put his small hand on the creature's foot. "It's okay to be angry about what they did. But you don't have to stay angry forever. You can choose to be something else." For several minutes they sat together in comfortable silence. Marcus told the Cathara about his family, his school, and his pets. He talked about the rescued animals they had cared for, and how even the most frightened and aggressive creatures could learn to trust again with enough patience and kindness. The creature listened to every word. It had not heard anyone speak of hope and healing in so long that the concepts felt foreign. But something deep inside its modified mind recognized the truth in what the boy was saying. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Military trucks and hover cars were moving through the city, searching for survivors. The rescue teams were getting closer. The Cathara heard them first. Its ears twitched, and it rose to its feet with fluid grace. For a moment, the old programming reasserted itself. These were soldiers, enemies to be destroyed. Its eyes began to glow red again. "Wait," Marcus said, standing up and putting both hands on the creature's leg. "Those are the people who are looking for me. They're not here to hurt you." The Cathara looked down at the boy, then toward the sound of the approaching vehicles. Its mental conditioning was telling it to attack, but Marcus's presence was like a cool breeze against the fire of its rage. "Stay," Marcus said firmly, using the same tone his parents used with their pets when they needed them to be calm. "Please stay right here." The word hit the Cathara like a physical blow. In all the years, since its capture, no one had ever asked it to do anything. It had only ever been commanded, controlled, or directed. But this small human was making a request, not giving an order. The creature's eyes faded from red to blue. It lowered itself back to the ground and waited. The first vehicle appeared around the corner moments later. It was a military scout car, with 2 soldiers inside. When they saw the massive creature sitting calmly in the middle of the street with a small boy beside it, they nearly crashed into a parked vehicle. The car stopped, and both soldiers jumped out with their weapons ready. But they did not fire. The scene before them was too strange to process immediately. "Marcus!" called one of the soldiers. "Get away from that thing!" "It's okay," Marcus replied, waving at the men. "This is my friend. Its name is—" He paused, realizing he did not know what to call the creature. "What should I call you?" Through their mental link, he sensed images of crystal gardens and singing stones. The word that came to him was not in any human language, but he understood its meaning. "Crystal," he said aloud. "I'll call you Crystal." The Cathara, Crystal, made the rumbling sound that Marcus had learned meant agreement. Its eyes remained blue as it watched the soldiers approach cautiously. "Son, that creature is extremely dangerous," the first soldier said. "We need you to move away from it very slowly." "But Crystal isn't dangerous," Marcus protested. "Look, see how calm it is? It's just been hurt and scared for a long time." More. Vehicles arrived. Soon there were dozens of soldiers, scientists, and rescue workers surrounding the boy and the creature. Many of them had weapons pointed at Crystal, but the creature made no aggressive moves. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived with the third wave of responders. She had insisted on joining the search when she learned that someone had found the creature, but nothing in her research had prepared her for what she was seeing. The Cathara was sitting peacefully, its scaled hide reflecting the morning sunlight, in gentle blues and greens instead of the angry reds that had been reported. And next to it, completely unharmed, was a small human boy who seemed to be talking to the monster like it was a pet. "Incredible," Elena whispered. She approached slowly, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "How is this possible?" Marcus looked up at her with bright, innocent eyes. "Crystal was just lonely. Nobody ever tried to be nice to it before. It's not really mean. It's just sad." Elena knelt down near the boy, being careful to stay within what she hoped was the safe zone of the creature's calm mood. "Marcus, can you hear its thoughts?" "Sort of," Marcus said. "It shows me pictures sometimes. It used to live in a really pretty place with singing trees, but some bad people took it away and hurt it until it got angry all the time." "The mental conditioning," Elena murmured. She looked at the creature with new understanding. "They broke its original personality and rebuilt it for war. But somehow, you're reaching the part they couldn't completely destroy." Commander Veltar arrived with a full battalion, ready for a final assault on the creature that had defeated his forces. But when he saw the peaceful scene, he held his troops back. His military mind was struggling to accept what his eyes were showing him. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was sitting quietly while a human child petted its foot. "Sir," one of his lieutenants whispered, "should we attack while it's distracted?" "No," Veltar said slowly. "Look at it. Really look at it." The creature's posture was completely different from the day before. Instead of the coiled aggression they had faced in battle, it now seemed relaxed and alert in the way of a guardian protecting something precious. How long have they been like this? Veltar asked Dr. Vasquez. We don't know. The boy was reported missing yesterday during the convoy attack. He could have been with the creature all night. Veltar stared at Marcus and Crystal, his mind trying to process the implications. If a single human child could do what an entire military force could, not. What did that say about their understanding of both humans and the creature they had been fighting? Marcus, Dr. Vasquez said gently, do you think Crystal would come with us? There are people who want to help it feel better. The boy looked up at the massive creature and put his hand on its leg again. Through their connection, he could sense Crystal's uncertainty. The creature had learned to associate large groups of people with pain and captivity. They want to help you, Marcus said softly. Like how my family helps hurt animals get better, but only if you want to. Crystal looked at the gathered humans and aliens. Every instinct it had developed over years of conditioning told it to attack or flee. But Marcus's presence was like an anchor, keeping it calm and focused. The creature made a decision that surprised everyone, including itself. It slowly stood up, being careful not to disturb the boy, and took a step toward Dr. Vasquez. Easy, Marcus said, walking alongside Crystal. These are the good people. Elena held her breath as the massive creature approached. This close, she could see the intelligence in its blue eyes, and the old scars that marked its hide. Here was a living being that had suffered greatly, but was choosing to trust again. Hello, she said quietly. My name is Elena. I've been studying your people, trying to understand what was done to you. Crystal tilted its head, and Elena felt a gentle touch against her mind. Unlike the violent psychic assault the creature had used in battle, this contact was curious and careful. She sensed images of her laboratory, her research files, and her genuine desire to help. 6 months after the first contact, the Galactic Research Council was still trying to understand what had happened on New Haven. Scientists from 12 different worlds had come to study Marcus and Crystal, hoping to learn how a human child had succeeded where armies had failed. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become the lead researcher on what they were calling the New Haven phenomenon. Her laboratory was now located in a special facility built just outside the colony, where Crystal could live comfortably while receiving care for the psychological damage of its past. The facility looked more like a park than a research center. Crystal gardens had been planted to remind the creature of its homeworld, and singing stones had been installed throughout the grounds. Marcus visited every day after school, usually bringing his homework so he could study while sitting against Crystal's side. The neural pathways are regenerating faster than we expected, Elena told the assembled scientists during their weekly meeting. The conditioning that turned Crystal into a weapon is breaking down, and its original personality is emerging. She showed brain scans that revealed the creature's healing process. The areas that controlled aggression and obedience were shrinking, while regions associated with empathy and creativity were growing stronger. But how is this possible? Asked Dr. Thorne, a psychologist from the Centauri system. Every species we tested was susceptible to the Cathara's mind control. What makes humans different? Elena smiled. This was the question that had driven her research for months. It's not that humans are immune to psychic influence. Marcus can communicate telepathically with Crystal just fine. The difference is in how human minds process emotional information. She brought up a new set of data on the main screen. Most species have evolved highly efficient mental defenses against psychic attack, but humans developed something different: emotional flexibility. Where other species resist psychic contact, humans adapt to it. The assembled scientists murmured among themselves. This was a new way of thinking about human psychology. You're saying that our supposed mental weakness is actually a strength? Asked Commander Veltar, who had become a frequent visitor to the facility. Exactly. Humans bond with other species more easily than any race we've studied. You treat enemies as potential friends, and you see persons where others see only threats. It's what allowed Marcus to connect with Crystal when everyone else saw only a weapon. Through the laboratory windows, they could see Marcus and Crystal playing in the garden. The boy was riding on the creature's back, while it moved slowly between the crystal trees. Both of them were laughing, the boy with his voice, and Crystal with the deep rumbling sound that had replaced its terrible roar. Dr. Vasquez had been documenting every aspect of their relationship. what she found challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about weaponized creatures and their potential for rehabilitation. Crystal is not just recovering, she continued. It's becoming something new. The combination of its original nature and its enhanced abilities is creating a being with unprecedented empathic powers. She showed video footage of Crystal working with other damaged creatures that had been brought to the facility. Abandoned war animals, traumatized pets, and even some former soldiers suffering from psychological wounds. All of them responded to Crystal's presence with remarkable healing progress. It's as if Crystal has learned to reverse the process that was used on it, Elena explained. Instead of imposing mental control, it shares emotional healing. This discovery had led to the establishment of the first interspecies rehabilitation center in the galaxy. Creatures that had been considered beyond saving were now arriving from across known space, brought by families and governments who had heard about the miracle on New Haven. Marcus had become an essential part of the program. His natural ability to connect with hurt animals, combined with his unique bond with Crystal, made him an effective bridge between the facility's staff and their patients. The boy was too young to understand the full significance of what they were doing, but he knew it felt right. Every day brought new creatures who were scared, angry, or hurt, and every day he and Crystal helped them remember how to trust again. The political implications are staggering, Commander Veltar told the Council during a private meeting. If weaponized creatures can be rehabilitated instead of destroyed, it changes everything about how we handle the aftermath of war. The Zephyrian Empire had initially demanded the return of their property, but public opinion across the galaxy had turned against them. The footage of Marcus and Crystal had been broadcast on news networks everywhere, showing people what was possible when compassion replaced cruelty. Several worlds had passed laws banning the weaponization of sentient creatures. Others had established their own rehabilitation programs based on the New Haven model. What had started with one boy and one creature was growing into a movement that might reshape galactic civilization. But for Marcus, the most important part was much simpler. Crystal was sad, and now it's happy, he told a reporter who was interviewing him for a documentary. That's what really matters. The reporter, an experienced journalist who had covered wars and disasters across the galaxy, found herself struggling not to cry as she watched the boy play with his enormous friend. "What would you tell other children who might be scared of creatures like Crystal?" she asked. Marcus thought about this seriously, the way he approached all important questions. "I would tell them that sometimes the scariest-looking things are just scared themselves," he said finally. "And if you're nice to them and patient, they might become your best friend." Crystal rumbled its agreement and gently nudged the boy with its massive head. The gesture was so tender that several of the camera operators had to wipe their eyes. Dr. Vasquez published her final report 6 months later. The document became required reading in xenopsychology programs across the galaxy, but its most important message was remarkably simple. The human capacity for emotional connection was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. In a universe full of advanced technology and sophisticated weapons, sometimes the most powerful force was still the simple act of treating someone with kindness. The report's last section was titled, "Lessons from a Child," and it concluded with a quote from Marcus himself. "Crystal taught me that there's no such thing as a bad creature. Just creatures that haven't been loved enough yet." Years later, when Marcus was grown and running rehabilitation centers on dozens of worlds, he would still remember that first day when he met a monster and discovered it was really just a friend who had been waiting a very long time for someone to notice. And Crystal, whose eyes now glowed a permanent, peaceful blue, would remember it as the day it stopped being a weapon and started being itself again. The galaxy was a gentler place because of what they learned together, that the most unstoppable force in the universe was not hatred or fear, but the simple power of one being choosing to care for another. In the end, all it took was a child brave enough to say, "Stay" to a monster, and wise enough to mean, "Please stay and be my friend."